as Jesus was betrayed. He goes to trial. We hear about Peter's denial. We hear about his brutal beatings. We hear about his execution, his burial. Folks, it's a dark night, a gloomy one. If you're like me, sometimes it can just seem, though, like this story, you've probably heard it a few times, if not, heavy. But if you have, perhaps it just feels like, I've heard this before. It's powerful. I know it's powerful, but it feels a little less fresh. It's not hitting me the same way. So I'm going to try something I often do with our confirmation students, our 7th and 8th graders. This well-worn story of all of Jesus's most pivotal moments facing his death. We include in our sermon notes these things that the confirmation students do. Who do you relate with in the story? Who in this story do you relate with when you hear the story told again? And in this story, y'all have no excuse to not relate with somebody, right? It's a long one. There's a lot of characters in this one. Judas, soldiers, Peter, the crowd, Pilate. I think what's so profound about this story this evening, this night where we gather here and hear this story, is that we are at any given time relating to one of these characters. I believe it completely. We often struggle with the same issues they do, same doubts, the same anger, the same confusion, sadness, feelings of powerlessness, feelings of shame, feelings even of apathy, indifference. But if you're one of the many who hear this story and say, I don't necessarily relate to any of these first century people, I understand. I am not from the same chronological or social location of any of these individuals. Confirmation students also struggle with this, so you are in good company. I think there's something profound here. What I do is I tell the story and I ask them, usually, I tell the story in a way from each character. So our story begins with this moment where Jesus is awaiting his betrayal. He knows it's coming. He's waiting for his betrayal in the garden. I think it's really hard to put ourselves in the mind of Jesus. But Judas, maybe Judas. How do you imagine Judas was feeling in the midst of this? If we have the most generous posture, can you imagine? Because he gets a very bad rap. But think about this. He's betraying Jesus for money, not even like an unbelievable amount of it. He's just basically fulfilling the role of a villain that's going to be told in countless stories. He's going to be the definition of villainy in some traditions. But I believe that this follower of Jesus, this one who spent time with Jesus of Nazareth, is so one-dimensional, so disenchanted all of a sudden by the teachings of this Jesus that he would want him arrested. Maybe he's just someone most generous, right? Maybe he's just someone who really wants Jesus to reveal himself, to be who he really is. To come face to face in this encounter with the powers of this world and show them who he really is. And if he is who he says he is, he won't let himself get handed over. He won't let himself be killed. He will show his power. Is that what Judas is doing? I don't know. Is what Judas is doing okay? Betraying Jesus? The most generous assumption we can have is maybe he believes the ends will justify the means if Jesus finally becomes who he's supposed to do. And maybe you feel that way sometimes. Maybe you can feel like you are just playing a role that needs to be played. It's not desired by everybody, but some of us are just doing what needs to be done. Maybe some would call me the bad guy, but maybe that's just doing what I'm supposed to do. Maybe I'm just being a good employee. Maybe I'm just being a good boss. You ever feel that sometimes you're just playing a role because you know it just has to happen. If you don't do it, somebody will, or somebody won't. So I have to do it. Maybe you relate to that. Or maybe you relate to these soldiers, the ones who are literally just doing their job. We don't know the stories of these soldiers before this. No one writes about these soldiers' great stories. They're just wearing the gear, going to their mission, and carrying out their orders. Think about those soldiers who are tasked with beating Jesus, arresting Jesus, the ones who are managing his crucifixion. Life isn't like a passion play where some jughead character is carrying a heavy stick and hitting those who are they're told to hit. We're not just seeing somebody who's playing a guard for this moment. It's real life. These are people. People with pasts, people with debts, people with families, people with parents, children. And they know today's work is today's work. And my work today is to do as I'm told. Do it well. You ever felt that way sometimes? Like your job really has little to do with who you really are, with what you truly value. It's just a job. It just pays the bills. I think of those extreme cases of someone just doing their job. We've heard about that throughout history. Think about the people accused of war crimes. Those who abuse power, hurt people who are beneath them. How many of them use the excuse, I was just following orders. And that explanation, of course, to us doesn't quell any of the anger we feel of unjust deeds, of abuse, of power. But they were following orders, right? They weren't not following orders. It's easy for us to say, the guards would say, don't obey these orders. However, but what about the repercussions? What about the promises I made? What about the debts I owe? Not just financial debts, but personal debts, allegiances, family, honor, relationships. We hear the story of people working jobs they know runs in conflict of some of their values, but you got to eat. Got to pay for the kids' food, kids' clothes for school, got to pay for the cars somehow, got to pay for the house, got to pay with keeping up for things, got to pay my debts somehow. This is not who I want to be, but it's who I need to be right now. I know I've struggled with that between honor and duty, between financial responsibilities, between ethical responsibilities, between expectations we have of ourselves versus the expectations held of us. An important reminder for all of us as we hear this story is that Jesus will be arrested, beaten, shackled, and crucified. And to the soldiers, sadly and cruelly, think about this, to the soldiers, this is just another day's work. This is likely none of their first executions. The Romans were known to be efficient. There's really one way to become efficient. Shame. We feel that the guards probably had maybe some element of shame. But if we want to talk shame, I mean, think of Peter. Maybe you relate with Peter. If you do, you're in great company. Faithful guy, he's a friend, he's brave. When the guards come, I love the story, he gets his sword out and he's ready to die for this thing. This is it. It's time. Sometimes we feel brave. We feel confident that we would stand up to injustice, that we would fight the good fight. Fight for folks against those who mean to do them harm. But of course, we remember Jesus says, put your sword away. Put it away. Because Jesus isn't expecting some suicidal bravery from Peter. He knows what's coming. He knows what's going to happen. He says, don't hurt this person. There's going to be plenty of bloodshed to come. Don't add to it. So Peter withdraws, right? He follows close behind. He hangs outside in the temple courtyard. He hangs out when he's confronted. Someone says, hey, you're one of those Jesus people. And he thinks, no. which is weird, right? He was just ready to cut someone's ear off. And now all of a sudden something's changed. No, I'm sure of it, they said. They said, I'm sure of it. I know who you are. You're one of his guys. And he has the chance to admit it, to boldly say, yeah, I am, and what of it? He doesn't. Jesus has already said, put your sword away. And in the courtyard, surrounded by blades of others that would mean to arrest him, to take his life, he looks at this and says, no. Surrounded by a crowd of people who would kill him if he spoke up. Will he do it? Will he actually die for this thing? You know what that's like. Big bark, no bite. When the crowd can tear you apart, perhaps it's best to just lay low. Angry crowds, maybe that's the one we can relate to the most. I think that one is perhaps the most relatable, especially when you have the feeling that, I'm not terrible like Judas. I'm not a betrayer, right? I'm not that guy. I'm not the villain. When you feel like you have the agency to say yes or no, you're very different from a soldier. You're able to make these choices. But you find yourself caught up in a crowd of maybe like-minded and frustrated people who get caught up in anger and say, you know what? This isn't okay. As an outraged, abused, and occupied people, I am frustrated. I'm in control of nothing. It's like Pilate does nothing we want him to do. At least I can handle this. Oh, we'll handle this or there will be a riot. We can take care of this issue. This is something we can control. Have you ever felt yourself caught up in the wills of others, swept up in a culture or a movement that if you were to scrutinize a little further, you would see, maybe this isn't the value I want to fight for. But that's the mob, right? It captures us. Think about politics. Again, this amount of ethical and moral gymnastics we can do, excusing bad actions, saying, those are rules. The rules. If you'd follow the rules, maybe I'd follow them too. Fighting fire with fire. An eye for an eye. Spoiler alert, Jesus wasn't into that. Think about the justifications we do of people carrying out judgments against our neighbors. People suffering under the will of a crowd right now. We would hope courts, judges would be fair. However, we have seen sometimes it isn't, and we excuse it away. Sometimes it's just the will of the mob, it feels like. And we know a mob can hurt a lot of innocent people in their pursuit of justice, getting even, getting it right. Or maybe perhaps you resonate with Pilate. You're thinking, I'm not Pilate, and send Jesus off to die, but maybe there's more to him, that maybe we, like him, see the world before us, the matters at hand, and we see it as simply a no-win situation. You can set him free, yes, absolutely, but the crowd will hate it. They want this. They're seeking control somehow. You can execute him. That would make them happy, but at the same time, doesn't feel like justice. There's no actual victim here. So instead of making a hard decision, we'll allow the innocent to suffer this time. Because truly, damned if you do, damned if you don't, right? This is no win. So what if we just washed our hands of it? We have those expressions, right? Not my monkey, not my circus. Not my problem. Perhaps that's the path of least resistance. You've been faced with regularly, and I've heard people say this, the world is so screwed up. I just stay out of it. Very Pilate of us. We often use that to excuse our inaction. Or worse, we tacitly accept wrongdoings, play games of What about this? What about that? Justifying things that conflict with our values. Absolutely, we could connect with Pilate. That's all to say. This story has countless characters we can relate to. The inaction, apathy, indifference of Pilate, the anger of mob mentality, the cowardice of Peter, the ability to have our jobs make us sometimes live alternatively to our own values, like soldiers who are just doing their jobs. We can be any one of these people at any time. But tonight we remember something that we also can't ignore from this story, which is that Jesus died for every single one of them. Jesus knew. Jesus knew how we would handle this. He even says, you say, you know, right? In other translations, in other gospels, he says they don't know what they're doing. It's like he's given up, knowing that their way is always going to be a way of violence, always going to be a way of justifying their anger. He knows we will act out of character or in character, act out of anger, out of shame, out of fear. And we have Jesus who is silent to Pilate, because what I think is saying is, what is the point of arguing with fear? What is the point of arguing with cruelty? He knows in the face of it that many of us would just throw our hands up and say, not my problem. Or like Peter, we would say, I have nothing to do with this. And what ends up happening is Jesus dies alone. It's not the end of his story. We know what's coming. We know what this moment will bring about. All this hatred, all this tacit acceptance of violence, all this crying out for blood to pay for our own frustrations, this scapegoat sacrifice. If only we could just hurt the world better. This ritual killing, man, this will bring peace. This will bring us peace. And what Jesus does is he reveals the truth, which is that is a lie. We cannot hurt the world better. We experience the pain of that attempt tonight as we hear about his brutal death. But we'll see in the following days, we'll be shown that God is not going to abandon us to this sacrificial, violent nonsense we're into. Jesus is going to reveal his love will overcome all of it. That's why tonight's called Good Friday. Because something critical is happening. That mirror of violence is being held up to our faces. And whether you call that sacrificial violence holy, divine, this is one thing: it is cruel. And Jesus walks straight into the middle of it to show us he will face that cruelty. He will face all of it. And he will defeat it. Tonight, remember, God is not done with us yet, no matter who we connect with in the story. Hear this: nothing in all of creation will separate us from the love of God revealed to us in Christ Jesus. Thanks be to God for a Lord who endures our ways, all of it, and says, I have a better way. Amen.